student laughed while cheating on the test until he received surprising news. Jason Miller felt his heart race as he looked at the human anatomy exam spread across his desk. It was his last chance to stay at the University of Michigan, and the scholarship keeping his dreams alive depended entirely on this final assessment. When he thought no one was looking, he discreetly slid his hand under the sleeve of his worn blue t-shirt and pulled out small scraps of paper where he had written down the toughest answers. A nervous smile escaped his lips as he thought about how he was outsmarting the system that had tested him so much over the past few months. Professor Barbara Wilson walked slowly between the rows of desks. Her 45 years of experience in higher education made her recognize every type of student behavior. Something about the way Jason fidgeted in his seat, the slight trembling of his hands, immediately caught her attention. The 22-year-old tried to hide the papers back in his sleeve, but his nerves betrayed him. Every time the professor got closer, he felt a drop of sweat trickle down his forehead. "Time's almost up, everyone. 15 more minutes," Barbara announced, watching Jason especially. He took a deep breath and kept copying the answers, believing he was being clever. What he didn't know was that those little scraps didn't have the right answers. His classmate, Tyler Johnson, had discovered his intentions days earlier and deliberately given him the wrong information. "All done, Professor," Jason said, handing in the test with a confident smile. Barbara took the paper and noticed some answers that were clearly beyond the level of knowledge Jason had shown in class. They were very specific, but completely wrong for the questions asked. "Jason, can you stay a few minutes after class? I need to talk to you," she said, keeping her tone neutral. The young man's stomach twisted. Those words echoed in his mind like a hammer striking metal. He knew exactly what it meant, but tried to keep his composure as the other students filed out of the room. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. When they were alone, Barbara walked over to Jason's desk. On the floor near his feet were the small scraps of paper that had fallen during the test. She picked them up and placed them on the table. "Would you like to explain this?" she asked, pointing at the papers. Jason felt his blood run cold. His hands trembled visibly, and he lowered his head, unable to find the words. I don't know where those came from." He tried to lie, but his voice came out weak and unconvincing. "Jason, I've been a professor for over 20 years. I've seen it all at this university. And you know I've been watching your behavior these past few weeks," Barbara said, sitting in the chair beside him. The truth was, she had noticed something odd. Jason had always been a dedicated student, but his recent grades showed a strange pattern. Perfect scores on extremely difficult questions, but basic mistakes in subjects he usually mastered. "Professor, I can explain," Jason began, but his voice cracked. "Then explain. I'm listening." The young man took a deep breath and told the whole truth. He talked about the pressure of keeping his scholarship, his financial struggles, and how some classmates seemed to have it so much easier because they had better study conditions. "I need this scholarship, Professor. Without it, I can't keep going. My grandma, she made so many sacrifices to get me here," he said, tears in his eyes. Barbara listened in silence, but when he finished, her expression remained serious. "Jason, I understand your struggles, but that doesn't excuse what you did. Cheating is a serious offense. I'll have to report this to the department," she said, picking up the papers. "Please, Professor, I'm begging you." Jason stood up from his chair. "Give me a chance. I promise I'll never do it again." "I'm sorry, but the rules apply to everyone." Jason followed her to the classroom door, desperate. In the hallway, he tried one last time. "Professor Barbara, you don't understand. If I lose this scholarship, it's not just my future at stake. My grandmother sold her house to help me with expenses. She believes in me more than I believe in myself." Tears streamed down the young man's face. Barbara stopped and looked at him. There was something genuine in his despair that moved her, but she still knew she couldn't simply ignore what had happened. "Jason, she began to say, when the college secretary came running down the hall. "Jason Miller," called out Deborah, the secretary. "Are you Jason Miller?" "That's me," he replied, startled. There's an envelope here for you. It's urgent. It's from Mercy Medical Center, she said, out of breath. With trembling hands, Jason opened the envelope. His eyes quickly scanned the typed lines on the hospital letterhead. His expression changed completely. "What happened?" Barbara asked, watching the color drain from the young man's face. "My grandmother. She's been admitted. She fainted at home and is in the ICU," Jason said, his voice breaking. Barbara saw the genuine desperation in his eyes. All her resolve to follow university protocol dissolved in the face of this situation. "Come on, I'll drive you to the hospital," she said, grabbing her car keys. During the 20-minute drive to Mercy Medical Center, Jason shared more about his life. He talked about losing his parents as a teenager and how his grandmother, Evelyn, had raised him alone. "She worked as a housekeeper her whole life to put me through school. Never remarried, never thought of herself. Everything was for me," he said, staring out the car window. "What about selling the house?" Barbara asked. "She sold it without telling me. I only found out when the used furniture she bought to replace the old stuff arrived. She said the money was to make sure I could graduate," Jason explained. "Now she lives in a tiny rented room in Brighton Heights." Barbara drove in silence, processing everything she had heard. She was beginning to understand the pressure the young man was under. When they arrived at the hospital, they went straight to the ICU. Evelyn was conscious, but visibly weak. Still, her eyes lit up when she saw her grandson. "Jason, my boy, you came," she said weakly. "Of course I came, Grandma. How are you feeling?" "Oh, it's nothing serious. Just a scare." She tried to downplay it. "And who's this elegant lady with you?" "Grandma, this is Professor Barbara, the one I always tell you about." Evelyn reached out to shake Barbara's hand. "Professor, it's so nice to meet you. Jason talks about you all the time. Says you're the best professor at the university," she said with a faint smile. Barbara took the elderly woman's hand, feeling her fragility. "The pleasure is mine, Evelyn. Jason is a very special student." "He's going to be a wonderful doctor, isn't he?" the grandmother asked, pride in her eyes. "He's always wanted to help people ever since he was little." Jason held his grandmother's hand, feeling even guiltier about cheating. Barbara noticed the conflict in the young man. "Yes, he has a lot of potential," Barbara replied. Just then, the doctor entered the room. "Mr. Miller," the doctor asked, "I need to speak with you about your grandmother's condition." The three of them stepped out into the hallway. The doctor, Dr. Michael Thompson, was a middle-aged man with a worried expression. "How's my grandmother, doctor?" asked Jason. "Well, the situation is a bit complicated. The tests showed that Evelyn had a severe hypoglycemic episode, but we found something more concerning," the doctor explained. "What do you mean?" Jason felt the world spinning. "She has advanced stage diabetes, probably for years, but it was never properly diagnosed. She'll need ongoing treatment and specialized care." Barbara saw Jason lean against the wall as if his legs were about to give out. "How much does the treatment cost, doctor?" the young man asked. "Well, with the public system, most of it is covered, but she'll need some specific medications and regular tests. I'd estimate around $400 a month," replied Dr. Michael. For most people, $400 wouldn't be an impossible amount. But for Jason, who was already working 2 jobs to get through college, it was astronomical. When they returned to the room, Evelyn was waiting anxiously. "So, it's nothing serious, right?" she asked. Jason forced a smile. "No, Grandma, you just need to watch your diet better." "Oh, good. I was already thinking I'd be a burden right during your finals," she said, relieved. Barbara watched the interaction between grandmother and grandson. The love between them was clear, but so was the way they shielded each other, hiding their worries. "Jason, I need to tell you something," Evelyn said. "You know that money I got from selling the house? I set some aside for your last semester." "Grandma, you didn't have to." "Of course I did. It's an investment in our future," she said, taking his hand. "When you graduate, you'll be able to take care of me. It's a cycle, my boy." Jason felt the tears coming again. His grandmother had just talked about using the house money for his education, while she herself needed expensive medical treatment. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. When they left the hospital, it was already night. Barbara offered Jason a ride home. "Professor, about what happened in class today," he began. "Jason, let's talk about it tomorrow. Today, you need to process everything," she said. "No, I need to say it now. What I did was wrong, and you were right to call me out. But now I understand I can't let my grandmother down," Jason said. "She believes in me in a way I don't even believe in myself." Barbara stopped the car in front of a small apartment building in the Brighton Heights neighborhood. "Jason, can I make you an offer?" she said. "Of course, Professor. You'll retake the test tomorrow in my office with no reference materials. If you score a 7 or higher, I'll forget what happened today," Barbara proposed. "Really, you'd do that? But there's one condition. If you don't get the grade, not only will you fail, but I'll have to report the cheating to the department." Jason thought for a few seconds. It was a risky bet, but it was also a second chance, one he didn't deserve, but his grandmother did. "I accept," he said, extending his hand. "Then I'll see you tomorrow at 8 in the morning." Jason spent the whole night studying. He hadn't slept a wink. He reread all his human anatomy books, made summaries, memorized every technical term. He knew this was his real last chance. The next morning he arrived at Barbara's office promptly at 8. She was already there, with a new test prepared. "Good morning, Jason. Ready?" "Yes, Professor." "You have 2 hours. It's a harder test than yesterday's, but if you truly studied the material, you can do it," she explained. Jason sat down and began the test. It was truly harder, but this time he knew the answers. Not because he had memorized them, but because he actually understood the material. 2 hours later, he handed the test to Barbara. "I can grade it right now if you'd like to wait," she offered. "Please." Barbara went through each question one by one. Jason had gotten 8 out of 10 correct. A B. "Congratulations, you passed," she said, smiling for the first time since everything had started. "Thank you, Professor. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "Jason, can I ask you one more question?" "Of course. Why did you cheat yesterday if you clearly know the material?" Jason thought for a moment before answering. "I think it was fear. Fear of disappointing my grandma, of losing my scholarship, of not being good enough," he explained. "When you have so much to lose, sometimes you take the path that seems safest, even when you know it's wrong." Barbara nodded in understanding. "And now do you still feel afraid?" "I do feel, but I've learned that fear can't make me choose wrong decisions. My grandma taught me to be honest, and yesterday I disrespected everything she ever taught me." 2 weeks passed. Evelyn was discharged from the hospital with a list of medications and medical recommendations. Jason had taken on a third job on weekends to cover the treatment costs. It was Monday morning when Barbara called him into her office again. "Jason, I got an interesting call today," she said. "What's it about, Professor?" "Mercy Medical Center has a paid internship program for final-year medical students. Someone recommended your name," Barbara explained. "Someone recommended me? Who?" "Dr. Michael Thompson, the doctor who treated your grandma. It seems he was impressed by your knowledge when you discussed her case." Jason didn't understand. He had barely spoken to the doctor. "Professor, I don't get it. I hardly talked to him." "Well, he said you asked very smart questions about diabetes and showed knowledge that impressed someone with his experience," Barbara told him. "The internship pays $2,000 a month." $2,000 was more than Jason made from all 3 jobs combined. "But I'm not in my final year yet." "I know. Normally it would be impossible. But Dr. Michael spoke with the program coordinators and said you could take some advanced courses to speed up your degree," she explained. Jason couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Does that mean I can graduate sooner?" "If you can keep up with the coursework, yes. Instead of 2 years, it could be a year and a half." That afternoon, Jason rushed to the hospital to share the news with his grandma. "Grandma, I have amazing news," he said, stepping into the small room where she lived. Evelyn was sitting in her favorite chair, one of the few things she had kept from their old home. "Tell me, my boy." He told her about the internship, the chance to graduate early, how it would change their lives. "Grandma, with this money, I can pay for your treatment and we'll still have enough to improve things." Evelyn began to cry. "Why are you crying? It's good news. I'm crying from happiness, my boy. And pride, she said, wiping her tears. I always knew you were special. Ever since you were little, you had something different. Whatever's special in me came from you, Grandma. No, Jason, what you have comes from inside your heart. I just tried not to get in the way. 3 months later, Jason had started his internship at the hospital. Dr. Michael became not just his supervisor, but also a kind of mentor. Jason, can I ask you a personal question? The doctor said during a break in their shift. Of course, doctor. Why did you choose medicine? Because of my grandmother, actually, replied Jason. When I was a kid, she was always getting sick, but we couldn't afford private doctors. In the public system, she faced long waits and sometimes got poor care. I saw her suffering and thought one day I'll be a doctor to take care of people like my grandma. Dr. Michael smiled. You know, that's exactly what stood out to me when we talked about her case. You didn't ask empty technical questions. Your questions showed you understood the person behind the illness. Doctor, can I ask why you recommended me for the internship? Jason asked. Because in 15 years of practice, I've rarely seen a student show such genuine empathy. Technique can be taught, Jason. Empathy? You already have it. With the internship salary, Jason managed to rent a small but decent apartment for himself and his grandmother. Evelyn was getting proper treatment, and her health had improved significantly. One afternoon, while studying at home, Jason got an unexpected visit. It was Professor Barbara. Professor? What a surprise. Please come in, he said. Hi, Jason. I came with some news, she said, sitting in the small living room. What kind of news? The university created a new scholarship program for academic excellence and personal resilience. Your name was nominated, Barbara explained, but I already have a scholarship. This one's different. Besides covering all tuition, it includes a monthly stipend for research and personal development, she said. $3,000 a month. Jason couldn't believe it. Professor, this would completely change my life. It would, but it comes with responsibilities. You'd need to maintain an A average and participate in community outreach projects. I accept without a second thought. There's one more thing, Jason. A committee of professors nominated you, but what really swayed the decision was a very special recommendation letter. From who? Dr. Michael Thompson. He wrote 3 pages about your potential and dedication, said he's rarely seen a student so committed. That night, Jason told his grandmother everything. Grandma, it feels like our life is finally turning around. It's not just turning around, my boy. It's falling into place, Evelyn said. You know, I always believed the hard times we faced were preparing us for something greater. You think everything happened for a reason? I'm sure of it. If you hadn't gone through those struggles, you wouldn't be the man you are today. And if you weren't that man, you wouldn't have impressed the people helping you now. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. 6 months later, something unexpected happened. Jason was at the hospital when Dr. Michael called him for a private talk. Jason, there's something I need to tell you. It might surprise you, the doctor said. What is it, doctor? You remember the day your grandmother was admitted? Like it was yesterday. Well, I didn't tell you the full truth that day, Dr. Michael admitted. Her condition was much worse than I let on. Jason's heart raced. What do you mean? She was in a diabetic coma when she arrived. Technically, it was critical, the doctor explained. I didn't tell you because I could see you were already under too much stress. But she recovered. She recovered because she got here in time. A few more hours and it would have been too late, Dr. Michael said. Do you know who brought her to the hospital? No. When I arrived, she was already admitted. It was Professor Barbara. Jason was confused. Professor Barbara? But how did she know my grandmother was sick? That's the interesting part of the story. After you left the hospital that day, Professor Barbara came back. She wanted to know more about your grandmother's case, said Dr. Michael. Why? Because she was worried about you. She said she'd seen you looking very tense these past few weeks and wanted to understand your situation better, the doctor explained. That's when I told her about the diabetes and the treatment costs. Jason began to realize there was much more behind his recent good fortune. Doctor, Professor Barbara, did she do something? She asked for my number and said if your grandmother needed anything to call her, Dr. Michael shared. The next morning, your grandmother fell ill again at home. Your neighbor called an ambulance, but she also called Professor Barbara. The neighbor had her number. Your grandmother had written it down on a sheet of paper stuck to the fridge. In case of emergency, call Professor Barbara, the doctor said. She got here even before the ambulance. Jason was in shock. His entire recovery, all the good that had happened, had started with that one gesture from the professor. Doctor, is there anything else I don't know? Dr. Michael hesitated for a moment. Yes, there is. The paid internship program you're in. It didn't exist before you, he revealed. What do you mean? Professor Barbara came to talk to me about creating opportunities for students in vulnerable situations. She proposed a new partnership between the hospital and the university, Dr. Michael explained. You were the first one selected. Jason sat in a chair trying to process everything. And the Academic Excellence Scholarship. That was her idea too. She talked to several professors about creating a program that evaluated not just grades but personal resilience, the doctor said. Your case was the model used to set the criteria. That evening, Jason went straight to Professor Barbara's office. She was grading papers when he knocked. May I come in, Professor? Of course, Jason. How are you? Professor, I found out some things today, he said, sitting down. Why did you do all this? Barbara stopped grading and looked at him. What are you talking about? The internship, the scholarship, taking care of my grandmother. Dr. Michael told me everything. Barbara took a deep breath. Jason, can I tell you a story? Of course. When I was 20, I was in my third year of biology. My family was very poor. I worked during the day and studied at night, she began. One day, desperate, I ended up cheating on a very important exam. Jason listened quietly. I was caught by the professor just like you were caught by me. I thought my career was over, Barbara continued. But that professor gave me a second chance. Not only did he let me retake the test, but he also offered me a research scholarship. What happened after that? That professor changed my life. He taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, especially when mistakes come from desperation, not bad character, she said. When I graduated, I made a promise. Whenever I saw a student in the same situation, I'd give them the same opportunity I was given. Jason felt tears welling up. Professor, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me, Jason. Pay it forward. When you graduate, when you're in a better place in life, do for the next person what I did for you, Barbara said. That's how the world gets better, one person at a time. That night, Jason came home with a new feeling. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, it was determination. He told his grandmother everything. Grandma, I want to create something to help other students like me, he said. What kind of thing? I'm not sure yet. Maybe a mentorship program or a fund to help with medical costs for students' families, he thought. I want others to have the opportunities I had. My son, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard you say, said Evelyn. You've learned life's most important lesson. What lesson? That blessings aren't meant to be kept to ourselves, but shared with others. A year and a half later, Jason was graduating from medical school. His final GPA was 8.5, one of the highest in his class. Dr. Michael had offered him a residency position at the same hospital, and he'd accepted. At the graduation ceremony, 3 special people were in the audience. Evelyn, fully recovered and beaming with pride. Dr. Michael, who had become like a father to him, and Professor Barbara, whom Jason had chosen as his graduation godmother. When his name was called to receive his diploma, Jason stepped up to the microphone. I'd like to dedicate this moment to 3 very special people, he said, his voice trembling. First, to my grandmother Evelyn, who taught me that love is the most powerful fuel there is. Second, to Dr. Michael, who showed me that being a doctor is so much more than knowing medicine. And third, to Professor Barbara, who taught me the most important lesson of my life. He paused, took a deep breath and continued. 2 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I cheated on an exam because I was desperate and afraid. I thought I'd ruined my future, he confessed publicly. But a professor gave me something I didn't deserve, a second chance. And not just that, she completely changed my life with an act of kindness I'll never forget." The audience was utterly silent. "Professor Barbara, you taught me that everyone deserves a second chance. Today, I want to publicly announce my project. I'm creating the Second Chance program for struggling college students," said Jason, "because I've learned that when we help someone, we're not just changing that person's life. We're planting seeds that will bear fruit for generations." The crowd erupted in applause. Evelyn wept with emotion. Dr. Michael smiled proudly, and Professor Barbara wiped away tears of joy. After the ceremony, the four of them gathered to talk. "Jason, tell us more about this program," asked Dr. Michael. "The idea is to create a support network, connecting struggling students with mentor professors, professionals in the field, and even financial aid in specific cases," explained Jason. "I don't want any student to go through the desperation I faced." "It's a wonderful idea," said Barbara. "How can I help?" "Professor, I was hoping you'd ask," Jason smiled. "I'd like you to be the program's academic coordinator." "I accept without hesitation. And I'd like to offer supervised internships through the program," added Dr. Michael. Evelyn listened quietly, a smile on her face. "Grandma, what are you thinking?" asked Jason. "I'm thinking that sometimes we need to walk through darkness to learn to appreciate the light," she said, "and that the boy I raised has become a man who will light the way for many people." 3 years later, the Second Chance program had already helped over 200 students across Michigan. Jason, now a resident specializing in endocrinology, divided his time between the hospital and coordinating the program. Professor Barbara had received a national award for innovation in education, and the program had been replicated at other universities in the United States. Dr. Michael had become the hospital's medical director and created an entire department dedicated to integrated community care. And Mrs. Evelyn had become the first grandma mentor of the program, offering emotional support to students who, like her grandson, needed not just academic help, but someone who believed in them. One Friday afternoon, Jason was in his office when he received an unexpected call. "Dr. Jason, it's Tyler from your old college class." "Tyler, what a surprise. How are you?" "I'm good, but actually, I'm calling to apologize," Tyler said. "Apologize for what?" "For giving you the wrong answers that day you cheated on the test." "I know you found out it was intentional," Tyler confessed. "I was jealous of your grades and wanted to bring you down." Jason was silent for a moment. "Tyler, can I tell you something? If you hadn't done that, I probably never would have been caught. And if I hadn't been caught, I never would have learned the most important lessons of my life," Jason said. "In a way, you did me a favor." "How so?" "That mistake led me to meet incredible people, discover my true potential, and find my life's purpose," Jason explained. "Today I'm grateful for everything that happened, including what you did." "Jason, you forgive me?" "Of course I forgive you. More than that, I'd like to invite you to check out the Second Chance program. Maybe you'd like to volunteer." "Really? Even after what I did?" "Tyler, the program exists for exactly this, to give second chances, and third ones, if needed." 6 months later, Tyler had become one of the program's most dedicated mentors. At the end of that year, during the program's Christmas party, Jason gave a special speech. "When I look at all of you today, I see so much more than students being helped," he said. "I see the future of the United States being built. Every one of you who gets a second chance today will give second chances to others tomorrow." In the audience were the 250 students who had been supported by the program, along with their mentors, families, and supporters. "I've learned that life isn't about the mistakes we make, but what we do after we make them," Jason continued. "And I've learned that generosity is like a river. When you let it flow through you, it always finds the ocean." Mrs. Evelyn, now 75 but in excellent health, stood up in the audience. "Can I say something?" she asked. "Of course, Grandma." "When Jason was little, I used to tell him that we plant today to harvest tomorrow," she said. "But today I realized we don't just plant for ourselves to harvest. We plant so others can harvest too, and that's so much more beautiful." The audience rose in applause. Jason stepped down from the stage and hugged his grandmother. "Thank you, Grandma, for everything." "Thank you, my boy. for showing me every sacrifice was worth it. At that moment, Professor Barbara approached them. "Do you know what moves me most about this story?" she said. "What?" Jason and Mrs. Evelyn asked. "When I gave Jason a second chance, I never imagined I was planting a tree that would bear fruit for hundreds of people," Barbara said. "It taught me we never truly know the real impact of our kindness." Dr. Michael joined the group, and I learned that sometimes the person we help today is the one who will revolutionize our field tomorrow, he said. Jason changed how we practice social medicine at this hospital. Jason looked at the three people who had transformed his life and felt deep gratitude. "Do you know what my biggest dream is now?" he asked. "What?" the three asked. "That 20 years from now, someone who was helped by our program will be here, creating an even bigger program to help even more people," Jason said. "I want this to never end." "This will never end," said Evelyn, "because you've understood the secret to true happiness." "What secret is that?" asked Barbara. "True happiness doesn't come from receiving. It comes from giving, and when we give from the heart, life always finds a way to return it twofold." 5 years later, the Second Chance program had become a national public policy. Jason had been invited to consult for the Department of Education. Professor Barbara had written a book on second chance pedagogy that became an international reference. And Dr. Michael had founded the country's first teaching hospital entirely dedicated to social medicine. Evelyn, now 80, had become the program's first national senior ambassador, visiting universities across the United States to share her story and inspire students. One Sunday afternoon, the family gathered in the larger apartment Jason had bought for himself and his grandmother. It was Evelyn's birthday. "Grandma, what do you want for your birthday?" asked Jason. "My dear, I already have everything I ever wanted," she said. "I have you, graduated and happy, helping others. I have wonderful friends like Barbara and Michael. I have my health. What more could an old woman want? But there has to be a gift. Then here's my gift. I want you to promise that even when I'm no longer here, you'll keep planting seeds of kindness," said Evelyn, "because that's the only way we live forever." Jason held his grandmother's hand. "I promise, Grandma, but you'll still see many more seeds sprout." "I'm sure I will," she smiled. "And you know what else? I'm sure that somewhere out there someone is going through the same despair you once did, and that person will find someone willing to give them a second chance. That's how the world works, an endless circle of people helping people." Just then, Jason's phone rang. It was a call from a university in Chicago. "Dr. Jason, this is the academic coordinator at UC Berkeley. We have a student here who, well, he made a serious mistake, but we've heard about your program." Jason smiled and looked at his grandmother. "Of course, let's talk. Everyone deserves a second chance." When he hung up, Evelyn was smiling. "See? I told you someone needed help today." "How did you know?" "Because when you plant seeds of kindness, they never stop sprouting." The end. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe Jason made the right decisions? How would you react if you were in Professor Barbara's place? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories that will inspire and touch your heart. Thank you so much for being here.